within the tree, the fungi, the insects, the animals, are they not also beings?
Yes, they are, and they are conscious, and that reality must be rendered for them from their own viewpoint. So you have a squirrel that lives in that woods, then those woods need to be rendered to that squirrel. That squirrel is conscious, and it needs to be rendered to that squirrel from a squirrel's view. It's not rendered from a human's view. It's just rendered from a squirrel's view. And if you're a bug, then it's rendered from a bug's view. But the amount of rendering and detail that goes into a bug's view is very different than what goes into the human's view.
Everything is consciousness. Everything is being, not just consciousness is abstraction, but beings. Yeah, there's beings behind everything that we might think is just inanimate.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, but in this particular presentation, I'm just looking at that part of consciousness that is sentient. In other words, that reacts. If you do this, it'll do that. And a clam qualifies for that, as would a bumblebee. If you poke a clam's foot, it'll pull it in. That makes it sentient. So that's consciousness. I don't include the rocks and the trees in this presentation, but that doesn't mean that trees and rocks don't have their own abilities. They work not on an intellectual level, they work on a feeling level. Okay, it's more of an emotive level. They also can be, associated with memory and with things. Yes, that's there, but that's a little different. So that's a little more of an advanced course. But in this, it's just basically sentient beings and up. I talk about people because mainly, people are the ones in my audience, and they kind of relate to what it is I'm talking about if I talk about people. It goes away because otherwise you'd have to have that data. Why would you stream data to an individual that didn't have any perception of that? Okay, now if I go to an altered reality frame, let's say I go to a different reality frame outside of the physical, I'm getting that data stream, but I'm not getting this one. Or if I'm parallel processing, I may be getting some of both. But there's hundreds of things. I'm not getting all the data streams that are in existence. There's a lot that don't have anything to do with me. So it's the same with this. You stop rendering where it's no longer necessary. Everybody's getting an individual data stream that shows their perception at the moment. So we change our perception, we get different data. They stop rendering the other stuff. It's just basically it answers that question of it's too hard to render the universe all the time. If you look at every atom and every particle in the universe or whatever, and you're rendering all the effects and all the supernovae and all the 100 billion stars and whatever else, gosh, that just couldn't be done. It's too big a problem. Well, you don't have to render all that stuff. That would be a big problem. It'd be a great waste of resources to do all that. You just render what you have to for the sentient beings that are observing. And that includes the bugs and the clams and the squirrels and everything that is sentient needs to have whatever it's sensing. That's what sentient things do, is sense. Whatever it's sensing, it needs to have that rendered to it appropriately.
So what is the data?
The data? Yeah, well, it's just the data, look at the virtual reality game. What's the data that makes your little, elf or whatever it is walk around? It's just the data that defines the scene, defines, the set and the props, defines the individual, defines the body. You're the consciousness that's running making the decisions. The data is just defining all the stuff. And it also, the data has to obey the rule set, which is about energy transfers. So our rule set, keeps us from, leaping 100 feet in the air here. So we can't do that. So it limits what can be done. So that's what the data is. It's computing the scene, computing the action, what happens and what comes back, and what each consciousness then is interacting with the other.
Who creates the rule set?
Well, the rule set was evolved. It wasn't created as a whole rule set. So when we talked about the big digital bang, okay, it starts, with a few fundamental rules, right? Who creates the rule sets? Well, consciousness creates the rule sets. The larger consciousness system is evolving, and it has various strategies to evolve, and one of its strategies to evolve was to have a virtual reality where units of consciousness could interact, because that is you can learn faster that way. So it comes up with rule sets. Now, how does it come up with the rule set? It evolves them. It says, well, let's try this. Okay, we'll have these sets of rules and with these initial conditions and let that go. And that plays out for a while and says, well, that didn't work. That wasn't useful. It didn't make a good set for then conscious beings to interact in. So let's try a different one. So just like anything else evolves, the rule set evolved with cut and try and see how it works. And that's why there's a lot of other reality frames out there, because this is one that worked, and then you can fiddle with the ones that work and change them a little bit like this and change them a little bit like that, but you sort of like some of the aspects of this one and some of the aspects of that one, and maybe they're incompatible and you can't do both, so you have different reality frames. So that's why there's so much stuff out there, is that it did just evolve, but it evolved in different forms. Like I say, anything that does work probably is working. That's the nature of evolution. It fills all the vacant space that it can. So that's how so it's not that somebody just figured out the whole rule set and how this reality would be and planted all the seeds. It was that it just over and over, big digital bang, take 10, and we try it again and try it again, and this one worked good, let's save that one and let's do some more. Let's modify this one and grow another one. Sort of the same way we do when we make things like that.